Welcome to the Unfiltered Podcast. We have an unfiltered leader with us today, Pat Morden. Welcome to the podcast, Pat.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you for being with us. Pat is a leader who champions, celebrates, and nudges and coaches herself and others to dig deep and flourish in service of their purpose. She brings to this her deep passion for possibilities, the learnings of her relationships, failures, joys, and challenges. And as a nurse, a CEO, a world champion, a widow, a volunteer, and a farmer, she's also my unfiltered guest with wonderful stories to share with us today and telling us how she is making an impact with the people that she works with and people in her life. Welcome to the podcast, Pat, once again. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Pat, who's Pat Morden?
Well, you did a lovely introduction. And the thing about Pat Morden is she's always had a passion for helping people and herself be at her best. And I would say that I lead. That's what I do. I love helping teams grow and making important things happen. And when I say I lead, I do that both from any seat in the boat. I'm a dragon boater, so that's my metaphor. And I believe we all are leaders in our lives. And so I think that that's what I do. I live in a very small town now, and I'm an active part of the Lions Club and other boards I've served on, the art gallery, and in my little concession here too. So that's who I am. I'm a woman who's, very interested and curious about the world, and I like to participate in it as much as I can.
Well, you've used 4 key words that just kind of make my head turn, right? You talk about participating and being curious. You talk about serving and leading. And those, I believe, are really essential to being an effective and inspiring leader. But what does leadership mean to you, Pat?
Leadership, when I talk about leadership, or I talk about just about anything, I'm a fairly simple person, and I talk about 3 things, A, B, C. So first of all, I like the notion that lots of the thought leaders in leadership talk about, that leaders help make things happen in complex times through or with others. And all of that's important. And I talk about, when I'm a leader, I need 3 things to be a leader, and A, B, C. So the first is, the A stands for acknowledgement. And to be a leader, you have to have followers, right? So I think to be a leader, you really have to acknowledge, be grateful for, and really love the people that really will help you bring whatever your vision is to life. And so you really have to have a dedication to relationships, building relationships, and helping your whole team be the best they can be. And it's not about me, it's about all of us. My job is being clear, really having a clear sense of purpose as an individual and whatever project we're doing. When I was a CEO, we had a really clear vision, and that was my job. I held on to that. When people looked at me, they needed to say, there's Pat Morden, she stands for this. And I would hold tightly to my purpose. I hold tightly to my purpose in my life. And I did it with kindness. And the C for me stands for the 2 things, compassion and curiosity. And compassion, I think you have to, as a leader, you have to have a purpose and hold on to it strongly. And you need to do that with compassion for all the people that are helping you do that. So compassion, it's a tough thing for people to do. But it's the thing. Compassion is the thing. It's the thing that makes things grow and flourish, and it's the thing that helps people grow and flourish. And one of the ways that I need to remind myself, and I talk about with my clients, is that if I'm curious, if I can stay curious, then I don't judge people. I don't get mad at them. I just get curious. And I always think of Howard Stern. Everybody else is pushing that big button, canceling the act. And Howard Stern would be leaning forward and saying, now what would make you think that was $1 million act.
Yeah.
I love that about him. I don't love everything about Howard Stern, but I love that sense of curiosity. And, you know, that's what I do. I do forest bathing as well. And I just love what the metaphors and the messages I find when I can be curious enough to get out in the bush, which I do every day. I live on 100 acres. And so acknowledgement, being really, really clear, having curiosity and compassion, those are the characteristics. And then as a leader, I can inspire others to collective action in complex times. That's what leaders do.
You know, I see your mouth moving, and I know those words are coming out of your mouth, but I believe they have a seat in your heart, and I can see it's your soul inspiring where things, you know, these thoughts are coming from. And, you know, this is what the Unfiltered Podcast is all about. It's leading from the heart. It's really digging deep to who we are essentially as human beings. So, you know, you start us off, and, you know, I'm all about emotional intelligence. I believe in leading with emotional intelligence, and I put it out there. Women, just rock it. You know, us men have so much to learn to be in touch with our emotional intelligence, to be able to do it as well and as naturally as most women do. Now, we can all learn to do it better, men or women, or, you know, and I don't necessarily believe this is confined to our gender, but it's confined to us recognizing the yin and yang, the female and the male within us, and understanding that it, you know, the male will help us to forge ahead and get things done and to be analytical and maybe direct, and the female in us is going to ask us to create and innovate and to listen and to lean in and to be curious, right? And this is what I believe the emotional intelligent part in us helps us to do, is to recognize that. Starts with self-awareness, starts with that acknowledgement. You can't acknowledge others if you don't acknowledge yourself. You can't appreciate the being of others if you don't recognize that you are a human being, not a human doer. And then, you know, you lead with compassion, you lead with being curious, and you call yourself a rewilding diva. I had to read that a few times. I had to think to myself, is there a spelling mistake there? Is it something else? What does she mean by rewilding diva? And then, you know, the more that I learned about you, you live out in the bush, you live in the country, you live with nature, you're connected, and you want to bring people back to those roots and to our natural environment to find ourselves. Tell me, who is this rewilding diva?
Well, rewilding, it came from I'm a certified mindful outdoor guide. And why am I that? Because my clients and myself, we heard about this mindfulness and presence and meditation, and you know, the evidence is now that 70% of our effects is our emotional intelligence, our ability to be present and to be mindful, and kindness is a big part of mindful. But I, like a lot of my colleagues who were in senior leadership jobs, go, so what is that? Like, how do I do that? I don't know. So that was a question I had lots. And then I got wondering and reading about, and serendipitously, I heard about this thing called forest bathing. And with the jokes of my children aside, I thought, I just might, you know, maybe there's a thing here. So I actually got curious and went down to Kripalu Yoga Center in Massachusetts. And I spent 9 days in the pouring rain, 6 degrees with 40 strangers. And I came away with an incredible experience to help other people use the metaphors and use nature to actually be mindful, to find mindfulness more quickly and to be present. And it was exactly, I mean, I live on 100 acres. I love being in the forest, but
Wow.
This ability, and I bring many clients here to my farm, and we use walks near their office, and we use plants in their office, and it was a way to be mindful and be present, and you know, to really collect themselves back if they get pulled away from their authentic self, their purpose. They want to be on purpose. We want to be on purpose as leaders. And so I was just so, I mean, you can imagine it. I don't get really excited about, well, I do get excited about things, but what I have seen and what my clients have told me about being in nature, and what a difference it's made to them as human beings in terms of being able to be mindful and present. And for people's mental health, especially during COVID, when we've all struggled with this, tape of worry in the back of our minds. And it's really interesting. I do some wellness coaching for people who work in long-term care. Long-term care is a big part of my heart and a big part of my career. And I still am coaching leaders who've had terrible experiences, and one of them who's had COVID, several of them actually, who've had COVID themselves, but saw people that they loved be sick and die. And I was coaching one. I was sitting out front of the farm, and I have a pair of headsets that actually you can hear the ambient noise. And this woman was quite ill and quite distraught. And all of these people are suffering from post-traumatic stress. And she said, "What's that sound? Stop. What's that sound in the background?" And I said, "Oh, it's the songbirds. It's the songbirds." And I convinced her. She'd been inside her house for months and not able to hardly put her head up. And her kids had built her a deck. And I said, "Why don't you go out on your deck?" And she began the next day going out on her deck to listen to the songbirds. And she will describe that as her start on her journey to health. And I have lots of stories like that. And for myself, I'm a widow. And when my husband first died, it was the trees. I would fall down and weep in the trees, and I'd look up and I'd see them standing there saying, "We're still here. We're still here. And so are you." And, it's amazing. It's amazing what the forest can provide us. That was a long answer.
No, well, that was a warm answer. And maybe it's because I can see the fire burning in the background, and it's so part of who you are, and the authenticity of your surroundings speak to who you are. And that image of you being amongst the trees, I think about how resilient the trees are. They lose their leaves, and yet they shed them, and then they grow new ones. And when we are close to our own nature, we can nurture the things that help us become more resilient. And we forget sometimes how natural nature is to us. I respect it. I love living in the city. I live, actually, if I could show you, I've got flowers and trees. I've got a stepped garden. I have over 100 trees in my backyard that are growing wild. And that's what inspires me. But at the same time, I could live downtown in a high rise, in a jungle of concrete, and I can thrive in both. But when I need to reconnect, I need to go into the woods. I need to go to where there's quiet. I need to go where I can hear the songbirds, where I can hear the wind. And you mentioned it during COVID, but even during a crisis or during any sort of internal challenge, we forget how important it is to connect with the environment around us. And, whether it's to connect with other human beings, as you have mentioned with the woman, and how you inspired her to just ground herself in being in her surroundings, but it's going back to that natural, ground yourself in being in your surroundings, right? And then, that was a long answer for me too, but it's really important, right?
Available to all of us. Even the science says that if we can see nature as you can outside your window, or you can imagine it in your mind's eye. I mean, we know with Olympians and athletes that they visualize their sport and the race, and that's a very effective mental health strategy. And so it's the same. People can imagine themselves being in nature in a beautiful spot. And it's something we can all access. And I remember when I was a CEO, there were days, and I would say to the receptionist that I had to walk by to go out the front door, and I say, "Judy, I'm going for a walk." And I knew I just had to settle myself and find myself again. And she'd say, "Are you ever coming back?" And I'd say, "Yes, when I'm sensible, when I'm back to myself." And she'd laugh, and that meant she just covered my butt while I was gone. But I knew I needed a walk to just get into, not just into nature, but into my body and into my heart and out of my head.
Well, it's that healing process, right? And I think a lot of the time we're so busy in doing that we forget we are beings. We need to experience. We need to slow down. We need to, self-care is really undervalued in our society. And right now, maybe most of us are familiar with self-care because we're all dealing with a pandemic. But the minute that things start to get better, people forget. They forget. They become ignorant, or they forget to acknowledge. They forget the ABCs, and they go back to just not being connected. And so my question to you is, how do you get people back to being connected?
It's a really great question. It's a question I think we all ask ourselves, right? How do we stay on purpose? How do we be who we want to be? And there's a lot of talk in businesses now about culture. We want to change our culture. We want a different culture. We want this and that.
We want to build our culture.
Yeah. So most people have spent a lot of money developing a statement, a mission statement, or a vision. So I always say to people, you need one of those for yourself. And I help all of my clients would have their own personal statement of purpose. But in businesses and I always say to people, you don't need to change your culture. You see that thing that you've got on your wall? You just need to pay more attention to that. Say, how do I show up in that way differently or more? Turn up the volume on that. And I work with lots of clients to do that, and it has remarkable impact. I think that a lot of people, I agree that people will go back you never go back. That the future that we find, the next normal, I think for many people, they have a real sense that how important their own mental health is, the mental health of their children. And I think that people have looked at self-compassion and, mindfulness is, Kristen Neff, I love her work. And she talks about our own self-compassion. And one of the ways I talk to people, I write this blog, on Instagram, Rewilding Diva. And I was just talking about this notion of being kind to ourselves, talking to ourselves as if we're our kind friend. Sometimes our language to ourselves is kind of mean, but if we were our best friend and they were in trouble, we wouldn't talk to them like that. So she talks about talking to yourself like you're your own best friend. And then this collective sense of we're all in this together. I loved when that meme came out for Canada, we're in this together. I used to sit and watch the Prime Minister and think, I'm sitting with all of Canada watching him. And there was such a unity, and it was such tough times on everybody. And then she says the third thing that's part of self-compassion is mindfulness versus judgment. And, to just be mindful of who we are, and that times are tough and we make mistakes. And, often I'm talking to my clients, they're trying to be, who they really want to be, and then they mess it up. We all do. And you know what? It's rare that we don't get a do-over. Some people won't let us do a do-over, but usually if we go back to them when we say, I really wasn't on my game yesterday, and that's not really what I meant, or that was kind of mean. I was mean yesterday because I was worried. And so I think it's for all of us. If we, the Dalai Lama says, if you can only do one thing, be kind. And, I saw a poster on that said, humankind, be both. And I loved that.
Wow.
I loved that.
I never have. I always, I did a TEDx talk and I said, we come from many different backgrounds, but we form one nation, humankind. And I've never tuned in about the need to be kind as a human and to other humans. That's powerful. I'm going to use it. Can I use it going forward?
It wasn't mine. I saw it on somebody else's Instagram.
I love it.
And he had quoted from me that day, and he said,
be both.
But it was on his, and he'd seen it somewhere else. So who knows? It's going around. It should go around.
Well, it should, and it will. And you can bet, anything that I will make sure to talk about being human and being kind is, I wonder if the person that came up with that word, if it was intentional or not, maybe. But you mentioned something earlier about leadership and about being together and being stronger together. And at a time of crisis and when feel like we're all falling apart and falling down, and we can help each other rise. And this isn't to, I know you mentioned political reference that I will not, go there. It's just I'd like to be very neutral here. But I think this is when we can really tell that our leaders are leading, is when they lead from the heart, when they can rally and bring us together, when they can be the person at the helm saying, I don't have a crystal ball, I don't have all the answers, but I can tell you, we are in this together. We will fall together and we will rise together. And you mentioned something else about writing and feeling and how we talk to ourselves and that self-talk and the importance of that in language. So, I'm thinking about good leadership here, whether it's how we talk to others or how we talk to ourselves, whether we are a leader leading a country or a household or a workplace, or whether we're leading ourselves where leadership needs to start. But you made me think of Elizabeth Gilbert, and she's a writer, and you've probably heard of her, right? And I was watching when COVID broke out and TED could no longer do in-person TED Talks. One of the first person they had, she may have been the second guest for a virtual TED Talk, and she is so down to earth and modest. And she was saying what she does daily is she will write to herself a letter, talk to herself in the voice of love, and she will talk to herself about loving herself. And love, what can I do today? And she will talk about her fears, because fear and love are the same face of this, different faces of the same coin. It's not fear and courage, and it's not love and hate. It's fear and love. And so she talks to herself about her fears, and it's love that responds back and tells her what she's doing well and what she can do better. And it's fear pushing back and saying, I don't know. And it's love responding and saying, let's discover together. And that when we can start leading as individuals, lead ourselves, be forgiving that we're, as you said, we're gonna make mistakes. Acknowledge those mistakes to others. The best part of being human is being kind. There you go, I'm using it already. Is being able to go back to the people that maybe you hurt, maybe your language was off par, but saying, I could have been my better self yesterday and I wasn't. I apologize. I want to do something different. And that's your compassion. So I commend you for your ABCs, keeping it simple. When you said ABC, I'm like, this is going to be pretty easy. I'm glad it has to be easy, because if I can't walk out of a session with you or out of a friendship with you or out of a connection with you and recognize that our whole experience was about ABC, acknowledging each other, allowing each other to being kind in that space of acknowledging and being compassionate and curious to lean in and listen and not judge. I don't know. And I think, I asked you about leadership and you gave me an answer, but you made me think. You made me introspect, and I think leadership really is about our ABCs, isn't it?
It is about that, and about being together. I think that leaders really have a job to have people feel valued. That's the acknowledgement and respected, and that they should come away from being with leaders feeling like they're better than when they came in the room, or when they leave a job, they can say, that leader helped me be the best I could be. And it's easy to judge people when they make a mistake. When you're a leader and you go, oh, God, how did that happen? Because, like Truman says, the buck stops with you. When I was a healthcare CEO, the buck stopped on my desk. But it wasn't about that. We're all human, we make mistakes. Sometimes we need to find our happiness elsewhere. But most of the time, they're good people who just messed up. And I had to take some responsibility for that too, because often they maybe didn't know or didn't have the right kind of support. And I truly, everyone I worked with, my clients, and certainly when I was a CEO, and that was a long time ago now, it's 9 years since I lived on my farm. And, people still contact me, my frontline workers, my nurses still contact me and talk to me. And I value them so much. They worked so hard to make our shared vision come true. And we all felt good. And it wasn't about me. It was about us doing this in service of. We were all in service of something that we believed in. And my job was to hold that. I never let that go. And they knew it. They knew that when I was around, flying around here, when I was there, that purpose statement that we had, that was it. That was the job. And if they weren't up for that, I wasn't up for them. And I've seen more leaders that I work with that have, really grabbed the courage to say, this is who we are as a company. This is what we're doing.
Right.
And been hugely successful.
You're reading my heart. I want to say you're reading my mind, but you're reading my heart, because as you are explaining what you've done and where you are, and again, I'm looking at you and hearing you, and I'm thinking, okay, you are in a different environment. You are a CEO. You probably sat in an office and not in your living room with a fire right behind you, right? I'd like to ask you, with your permission, to go deeper. What made you move from being that CEO, which I believe you were likely a CEO who led from the heart and was warm, just listening to how you worked with your team. So I don't think you had a very dark and bright aha moment that made you go to where you are. I think you always led this way as a CEO, but was there something that made you just kind of come back to a different lifestyle altogether?
Well, it's a long story and I'll make it short, but essentially, I said I was a world champion, and when we were on the plane coming home from the world championships, I said to my husband, well, my bucket list is, really full. And I'm grateful that you followed me on this journey because it was hard. And I said, so it's your turn. And he said, well, there was that farm I wanted to own. So we bought this farm property in Grey County, and he became a farmer. My board asked me for 7 months notice. I think they thought I'd changed my mind, but I didn't. And I had brought coaching as a model into my organization, and I had certified as a coach, and I'd done the CTI leadership program in California. And I thought, you know what, I think I'm meant to be a coach. And so I opened my coaching business up here, and that's what I've done flat out full time. Doug farmed. He was so happy. He loved it here. I'm very grateful we followed our hearts, because he died 4 years ago. And that dream would never have been fulfilled if we waited till we were ready or we retired. And we became a part of this wonderful community. And I feel like I just have become a leader in a much larger world. And I've had an opportunity to bring that coaching and to bring my leadership and my experience as a leader and as a CEO to others in a rural area. I'm a very successful coach. I coach full time pretty well, and I do most of it here in rural Ontario. And I'm very proud to be up here. And I'm totally I'm so lucky. I don't like being a widow, believe me, but I love my farm. I'm transforming it now into a rewilding center. And I still have a few animals, and certainly I have cash crops and things like that. And I can drive a tractor with the best of them. But I feel like the love I had and the passion I had when I was a CEO, I still have. I just have a different purpose, and that's
you channel it to something else. Yeah. And I can see how you are so intentional about the choices that you make, because if we're not in life, we're not aligning with our purpose. You're intentional about living in a rural community. You're intentional about serving those in a rural community. I know it must mean a lot to you. You've mentioned that a few times, and we all talk about finding our niche and branding ourselves. And it sounds like you've branded yourself in this area where you've come down to saying mindfulness is part of being back in nature, and that's how we nurture ourselves. And I think that's really important. And the other thing is, I know you've talked to me about your ABC, and I want to go down to G. And you talked about gratitude, and you've mentioned that several times now. And the G is really important, right? Gratitude is really important. And you could have chosen, talk about the choices we make, I think you could have chosen to continue feeling the difficulties of losing someone and being a widow. And you seem very whole and connected with yourself and your surroundings and at peace. Can I ask how you've dealt with adversity?
Sorry.
No, to me, that's a very difficult time in our life when we lose a significant other, but it's adversity, but you seem to have been able to build on that adversity and triumph. And how have you done that?
Well, I talk a lot and I do a lot of work with people on noticing the stories we tell, the true stories we tell about our lives. And so you mentioned me being a widow. It's true. I'm a widow. It sucks. It's terrible. I hate it. That's a true story. And if I live that one, my life doesn't feel very whole. It doesn't feel very happy. I certainly can live it. I go under the covers like everyone else with a bottle of red wine now and again and live that story. The story I choose to live is I'm a woman who was well loved and who loved back and who was with somebody who took a risk on life and who was a lot of fun. And that enriched me and it enriched my children. So when I can say that I have been well loved and that I have a legacy in my heart, then I live a different kind of life. I live a different kind of life.
By choice.
By choice, because I can choose the other true story. And I think for all of us, it's noticing the stories that we're living. And, I was talking with a team yesterday that I work with. And when I first met them, they said the story of their team was, it really sucked. The morale was low, la, la, la. You know the story. We both told that story. And yesterday, the story they chose was, we're a bunch of kick-ass women and we are hard to get along with and we're working to get along together. Now that's a whole different story. And my heart sang when I heard them tell that story.
And you helped them get there.
Well, just asking people to notice. So, is there another true story here?
Right.
Because both are true. But some of the stories we live in have no energy in them. They have no place to go.
Well, it's amazing. Go ahead, sorry.
So
go
I
ahead.
want to say, we all go to the dark side. There's all sorts of psychological reasons that we do that. And so my challenge in my own life, and I think challenge in most of our lives, is to notice when we're in the story that doesn't serve us and put on our big girl pants or big boy pants and say, I'm not living there. I'm going to live in this one. And I need to create a better one that has a path forward. And that's, a lot in my blog. Elizabeth Gilbert writes herself a love letter every day. I write a nature blog every day on Instagram. And in a lot of ways, it's my love letter to myself. It's reminding me of things that are important to me. And there are days when I head out into the bush with my four-legged, and I'm not exactly feeling on top of the world. I might be dragging that other story behind me, but I go out and I find the metaphor. So, I'm really doing the same thing and journaling or writing. Most people don't like to write. They say, oh, I can't write, I can't draw, I can't do that. But if you just take a book and you just write, don't make up anything. Grammar doesn't have to be any good, or you can do it on your computer. It's amazing what comes out of your mind. And sometimes when you write things down, you go, oh, shit. That's
right.
And then you get a chance to say, oh my goodness, that's what's in my head. No wonder I feel like that.
And what I wanted to say to you is, if I asked you to read a book today, what book would you read? You'd be very intentional about the book you want to read. And it probably isn't the dark one. You probably don't want to choose, unless, you just wanted to read that for the entertainment purposes, but you don't want to live that book. So why would we choose to live and by the story we tell ourselves. So what I love about what you're saying is acknowledge the stories that we're living through. Recognize that some days it's okay to be living that less than favorable story, that darkness, but let it go. Acknowledge that you could write a better story, be in a better place, and then lean in, be curious about your surroundings and who you are and where you want to be, and be compassionate. And I find it difficult to think that if we choose to be compassionate to ourselves first, that we acknowledge and allow ourselves to remain and exist and be in a darker place. So, I don't want to simplify it for people who are going through difficulties. I've gone through many difficulties in life, but I've only allowed myself to rise when sometimes you have to break into a million pieces to put yourself back together. Sometimes it has to be really dark at the bottom of that cave for you to see the only visible light and make your way towards a ladder that's going to let you out. And sometimes walking through those trees and through the thorns and the sharp branches is the only way you're going to recognize the importance that on those leaves you could choose to find, on those branches you can choose to find leaves, and you can choose to find shade, and you could always write a new story. So I want to thank you for sharing your story with me today. And I want to ask you, something that I share with my listeners. It's called the Unfiltered Thought of the Week. If you could give one piece of advice to my listeners, what would that be? What unfiltered piece of advice would you give them?
Advice is a dangerous thing. I think that the piece of advice I would give to them, it's the one I give to myself, and it's one I give to people who ask me for advice, is listen to your own heart. Listen to your own heart. You know what's best for you. Have the courage to say yes to that.
Thank you. Thank you for having the courage to share with us and with the people you're working with and the people you impact to make a positive change in their life, and for being an unfiltered leader. Thank you for being my guest today.
My pleasure. It's always great to say out loud what I believe.
Thank you. Blessings to you.